I don't remember too much from before I was a little girl. There's some things I can never forget. The taste of baked muffins for breakfast every morning, how soft and warm my blanket was when I made a fort in the house, and the way the sunlight felt on my face when I ran outside. But there's so many other things that I have forgotten. Things I never thought I would forget. I forgot who my parents were. I remember I had them, but not their names, nor even what they looked like. I remember my father picking me up to show me the fireflies at night, and I remember how the bright bugs crawled along my hand and how they made my hand tickle, but I don't remember my father's face, even though it was inches away from mine. Did he have a beard? Was he clean shaven? Did he have hair like mine? Did he have different hair? Did he even have hair? Sometimes in my dreams I think I can remember, but when I wake up, I can no longer remember. In place of those memories, my thoughts feel like they are cotton wrapped in barbed wire, so sharp but also so weak and soft. I cry when I try to think about my father. I don't think about him often. I know he taught me so much, and I remember what he taught me. I remember learning about fire and how to always respect it, but to never fear it. I remember him teaching me about weapons and him telling me that every time I hurt myself with it, it was an important lesson. I don't know how old I was, but I think I was too young. When I think about my mother, I don't grow sad. I grow angry. Where I cannot remember any of my father's kind words, I know that they were kind. And so many of my mother's words, though I can't remember what her voice sounds like, I remember how much her words cut. There were fights and arguments. I remember her yelling at me when I was covered in dirt. Maybe I was playing outside when I wasn't supposed to, or I got dirty when I wasn't supposed to. But in the end, that didn't matter. What does matter is I remember looking down at the tile. I remember seeing the stars in those dark blue tiles. It was like the night sky with all those stars, and I could hear my mother calling me irresponsible and disgraceful, and I remember in a soft and quiet voice I said, "I love you, Mom." And she didn't even stop her rant. So I said it again with tears in my eyes. "I love you, Mom." Only now she paused her tirade to answer. "Well, I'm sorry. I don't love you right now." I know she continued, but I don't remember what else she said. She cut me with a knife, and she didn't even notice what she did. I remember crying in my bed, and I remember my stomach growling for the rest of the day. She must have sent me to bed without supper, and there were so many other times. I remembered her screaming, but I don't remember why she was screaming or what was so important she felt she had to yell. I only remembered shaking whenever she raised her voice. I remembered shaking almost every day. There were happy moments and memories with her. I knew that there had to be happiness with her too. I can't remember any, but it had to be there, somewhere. It couldn't all be pain and screaming. Surely there were moments I made her proud, moments where she loved me, moments that reminded me that she loved me. I just don't remember any of them. That's what I tell myself, and I hope it isn't a lie. I remember growing older, but I don't know how old I was. I remember a girl who came to visit almost every day when I was older. A girl with beautiful golden eyes, a warm hug, and a soothing singing voice. I don't know who this girl was, and I don't think I ever knew. Maybe she was a neighbor or a distant relative, or maybe she just showed up one day and then she was now a part of the family. I remember her arriving, but never leaving. I do remember her name, Aurora. My mother adored Aurora so much. She never raised her voice at Aurora, and when Aurora was in the room, my mother would never raise her voice at me. She would still get angry, but she would never yell at me when Aurora was next to me. When I asked Mother why she was so nice to Aurora, she told me something that broke my heart, even though I don't think she noticed. Aurora is important. Again, I don't think she meant to say anything so hurtful, but it still stung. But even as my mother adored Aurora, my father never seemed to notice that she was there. He would take me with him to see the singing roses and walk down the winding paths that never turned. We would still spend time together, and I thought that things were going to be better, and for a while it looked like it was. But one day, when my father took me home after a long day out, I don't remember what we did. We did something, and I was pretty sure it was fun. He was carrying me in his arms, and I was half asleep. I just laid in his arms, listening to his heartbeat. I hadn't seen Aurora all day, but when my father opened the door and saw what was inside, at the time I thought my mom was just sick. After all, she laid on the floor, she was asleep, and there was vomit all along the floor. As I got older, the details I skipped over became more important. The ruined birthday cake that said "Happy Birthday, Ava," the empty bottles of wine, the smashed presents, the cracked television screen showing static, and Aurora sitting in the corner, playing with the toys that were in the smashed presents. My father had planned a birthday surprise for me, and he trusted my mother to set it up while he took me out, only for him to come home to see that she drank herself into unconsciousness. He took me to bed, even though it wasn't bedtime, and he tucked me in while he went downstairs to clean it up and maybe have a talk with my mother. Father never got angry at anyone, not even when people hurt him or even when they hurt me. But I remember feeling scared he would get angry this time. While I pretended to sleep, I heard the door creak open and I peeked through my eyelids to see it was Aurora standing there. Aurora never slept and she never had a bedtime, so she usually kept me company while I slept. Sometimes she would lay next to me, keeping me warm when it was cold. Sometimes she would read stories to me, stories I never heard of anywhere else. And sometimes she would hang on to the ceiling and watch me all night with her unblinking golden eyes. But something felt different this time. Aurora wasn't always the nicest to me, but tonight she was mean in a way I didn't know she could be mean. Oh, little Ava, I had a great day today. You know what we did? I closed my eyes and turned away to keep from noticing what she was talking about. She only giggled like I was being silly, and she kept walking. She got close, and I could feel her run her fingers on my blanket like they were spider legs. Even as a young child, that didn't feel right. She had far too many fingers, and it felt like she was everywhere on my blanket as she whispered in my ear, "We had your cake. She gave me all of your presents, and she drank and drank and drank. She was so happy that you were gone. You know what she told me? She asked, and I pulled up my blanket over my head. But I could still feel her breath in my ear, and she kept speaking, even when I pressed my fingers in my ear, trying to ignore what she said. She told me that she wished I was her mother. She told me that she was tired of you and that she never even wanted to be a mom. She told me she was going to get rid of you. She broke every gift for you just so that you don't have it. She didn't return it. She didn't throw them away. She didn't take them for herself, even if it was something she really wanted. She broke them all and left them for you to see, which is a lot like you. You're a broken gift she can never give back, never give away, and never throw away because you're too broken to even be trash. She wakes up every day and she sees a broken child that only drags her down. How long until both her and her husband finally get rid of you? My parents would never get rid of me. They both love me very much, I said, finally responding to Aurora, who only chuckled, and her voice dropped, and her breath chilled me even through the blanket. Well, your mom doesn't love you right now, and your dad loves your mom too. He loves her so much that he still chooses to stay with her. Right now, he's cleaning up after her, and he's still not angry because he loves her too much. What happens when your mother tells him if he loved her, he would get rid of you? Do you think he loves you more than he loves her? Aurora asked, and I removed my blanket to look at her. Instead, I saw a boy in the corner of the room. He had the same face as Aurora, same golden eyes, same pale skin, and even the same half smile, but his long hair was parted differently, and even across from the room, I could hear his whispering as clearly as if he was whispering in my ear. Well, I know what deal I made with your mother. When she wakes up, you will be gone from her life, never to return. But I never told her how I would honor that deal. So, intrigued, I now offer you a chance and a choice. If you leave before she wakes up, you will have a new family, a mother and father who both love you, even if they don't understand you. What form that love will take, well, I cannot say because I do not know. But I do know that a deal maker always honors their deals. Do we have a deal? Will you leave before she wakes up? He asked me as he extended his hand through the darkness to just in front of me. I don't know how he extended his arm so far, but I refused to take it. I'm not leaving. My dad loves me and I'm staying. I told him and I turned around facing the wall. The cold faded from the room and Aurora's voice returned. I don't know where the boy went, but I heard Aurora's soft voice speak. Brave girl, foolish and yet so brave. I am a lot of things, little girl, but I am no killer. But I am also not someone who breaks deals. That honor belongs to someone else. Your mother's deal will be honored. Her daughter will be gone before she wakes. So, until you leave, your mother will never awaken, Aurora said as I laid in bed. I didn't believe her. even though her words haunted me for most of the night. But eventually, I did manage to fall asleep. The next day, Aurora waited downstairs at the kitchen table. She didn't address me, but she did glance my way when she thought I wasn't looking. But unlike many other mornings, there were no muffins. Eventually, my father came to the kitchen and he told me that mother was just sick and she was going to be resting for the day. I looked towards Aurora, who smirked and kept drawing in her own personal notebook. That morning, my father taught me how to make muffins. He helped me measure the flour, the berries, sugar, and butter. He had me stir it, and I remember how joyful I was to use the whisk for the first time instead of a fork. And I remember how the midday sun shone through the glass ceiling and how it reflected from the polished marble whisk. Moments like that frustrate me to no end. I remember the taste of the batter. I remember the fact that every bowl, plate, and utensil were made out of polished marble that never chipped and never corrupted. I even remember the way the sunlight shone through the thin marble in an almost magical way, a form of light I have yet to see anywhere on earth. But just past that whisk is my father's face. But no matter what I try to remember, I never can focus my eyes past the whisk and see my father's face. I was too fascinated by everything else. When the muffins were done, the smell filled our house. When the muffins were taken out, my father put one on a plate to cool for me, and he took two muffins on the plate back to his and Mom's room. When he left, Aurora stopped writing in her notebook and stalked over to where I sat, staring at my muffin. She picked the hot muffin up in her hands and she looked it over without flinching from the heat. Have you thought about my deal at all? Or does your mother still need more sleep? She asked without even looking my way. She stared at my muffin like it was the most fascinating thing in the entire world. She slowly twisted it like she was admiring it. I'm not leaving. My dad still loves me. You can wake her up whenever you want. I told Aurora, only for Aurora to finally make eye contact with me. Her eyes were bloodshot and puffy. Tears were still falling from her eyes as she faced me. Even as I watched tears fall in onto the table, her voice didn't shake, even though it looked like she should be shaking. No, I cannot wake her whenever I want. The only time I can wake her up is when you leave your family forever. The only way to wake her up without you leaving, well, the one you'd have to deal with is a lot less fair than I am. But even if she's more equitable, you'll be in the same place you were before your mother slept. We'll all be together as a family. I told her proud, and Aurora sighed before she peeled the muffin's wrap off as she started to bite into my muffin. Ava Eventide, you may all be together, but I can promise you that you won't be a family together. Your family hasn't been a family since the day you were born. Even if you want to seek out the deal breaker, and you are welcome to, but trust me, sister, that price will be so much higher than what I am asking, she said with a finish, leaving the muffin wrapper on my plate as she sighed and she looked away. You don't know how much this hurts me. Some people get to their best potential with gentle warmth and care, but others get that way with the heat of the furnace and the swing of the hammer. You're refusing to yield from the warmth and the first strike of the hammer, but that doesn't make either stop. It only makes the furnace hotter and the next swing so much harder. This was the only kind path, Aurora finished. I never got a chance to ask her what that meant because my father returned, and he saw the empty wrapper on my plate. And even though Aurora was sitting there on the table, my father still ignored her. "Oh, you already ate, that's good," my father said as he took my plate from me. I tried to speak up, to tell him Aurora ate the muffin, to tell him that I was still hungry, or even that I wanted another muffin. But for some reason, whenever I tried to tell him, the words wouldn't come out. It continued like that for a long time. Father would take Mother's meals to their room, and I would eat out on the table, alone, with Aurora. Every time we were alone, she would take food from my plate and eat it for herself. Usually she would eat everything on my plate before I had a chance to respond. Sometimes I would get a bite or two before she took everything else. I tried fighting her or protecting my food with my arms and head, but she was so much stronger. She wouldn't even react to me punching her face or grabbing her arm. And when my father returned, he would take my plate away, and I could never tell him that I was still hungry. The words never came out. So I learned to sneak food between meals. But I had to be careful because Aurora would take the food away from me if she saw me with it. She was very good at taking food. One time I thought I was alone in the kitchen, so I grabbed an apple, and before I had a chance to bite into it, she already took the apple out of my hand. She was on the ceiling, hanging upside down, somehow, and I still don't know why she climbed on the ceiling sometimes. She wouldn't take food at any other time, just whatever food I was trying to eat. I tried setting a plate out for her, but she would ignore it and only take my food. And when I tried eating her cold food, she would then turn her attention to the second plate. The few times I went out with my father, she would join us in the walking, and he would never notice her nor comment on her actions. But when we stopped to eat, she would wait for him to step away to talk to someone else, or sometimes when he so much as turned away, she would steal my food. So I had to learn to eat quickly in public, and when I managed to sneak food by her, I was to eat that quickly too. And I had to eat a lot of it because I never knew when I was going to be able to eat again. And this entire time, Mother never got any better. Father never let me see her. I remember thinking that Father looked sicker and sicker as time went on. We went out less and less, and people often came to check on our mother. Healers, priests, magicians, scientists, and even the elusive village barber all visited her, trying to see what was wrong with her. But no one would discover anything. As far as anyone could tell, she was just sleeping, and she could wake up at any time. "Why do you let your mother suffer?" Aurora asked one night from underneath my bed. Her head and most of her body was underneath my bed, but her hands extended out from underneath to hold me down against the bed. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe, but I could still talk to her. without my voice. While she held me down, her friends visited in my room. They sat in the dark corners of the room. I saw them smile at me from the darkness. Things that had eyes that glowed brighter than a cat. Things that smiled whiter than a crocodile. And things that had more teeth than a snail. Horrible things that stared at me in the darkness, waiting for my door to close just a little bit more and remove that last bit of light that was protecting me from their hungry maws. I could tell that they were hungry. Even eons before I was born, they were hungry. These things were waiting to taste me, and they would have the patience to wait eons more, but they would eat me eventually. I'm not letting my mother suffer. I'm not the one who purred her to sleep, and I'm not the one who made a deal with you. I'm not going to leave my home, no matter what you do to make it uncomfortable. My father loves me, and this is my home, I told Aurora, who still hid underneath my bed. Aurora didn't answer, not with words at least. One of her arms stopped holding me and reached across my room to the door that was open, just a crack. It was over 5 meters away, and still her arm extended that far, as she grabbed the door handle and pulled it shut. The last bit of light fell away from my face, and I felt my pulse quicken as Aurora's arm joined its twin in pressing down my chest. I could barely breathe, and even when I tried to scream, nothing came out. No sound, no scream, just a loss of precious breath as I tried to scream for help. I tried many times that night to scream, but it didn't help. It only made things worse. The creatures of the darkness swarmed around my bed in the corner of my half-closed eyes. I could see them fight each other, slither over one another, and even try to climb onto my bed, but none of them were quite able to reach it. It was like my bed was a lone boat on a sea of monsters. I could feel swaying and scurrying just underneath my mattress, and I could see, just beyond the foot of my bed, the waves of the monsters rising and falling, like I was at sea, but still I couldn't move from underneath Aurora's grasp. But underneath the chittering, the scurrying, and the skittering, I could hear something else. Coming from underneath my bed, beneath the noises of the creepy crawly critters, was sobbing. Quiet sobbing, for sure, but sobbing I could still hear. Aurora was sobbing underneath my bed, but I didn't know why. She was getting exactly what she wanted. She was torturing me. Wasn't that the point of everything she was doing? It had to be another part of the torture. Maybe she was trying to convince me to cry also. I resolved that night not to give her the satisfaction. I don't know when the creatures disappeared and when Aurora stopped holding me down, but when I woke up in the morning, they were gone. Ecstatic to be free, I ran downstairs to tell my father, only to see Aurora sitting at the table. I saw that my father left a note for me and a plate full of muffins, or I should say a plate that was full of muffins. It only had empty wrappers, and Aurora held the note in her hand, and when she saw me, she smirked as she read the note. Dear Ava, I am sorry, but I'm taking your mother to the City of Sleep to see if they can do anything to awaken her. I should be back in 2 or 3 days. I love you, and I hope these muffins help tide you over. Aurora read out loud to me. Well, looks like he really does love her more than you. He left you behind, and she gets to be with him. But sadly, the City of Sleep isn't going to be able to help her. You know the only way to help her, she told me, and I turned away, keeping my tears inside as I refused to give her the dignity of being right. I had no way of calling for father, and we didn't have any neighbors. The only friend I had was Aurora, and she wasn't the friendliest friend in the world. But as bad as it was with father in the house, being alone with Aurora made everything so much worse. When she wasn't eating my food during meal times or holding me down as I slept in an ocean of Mara, she was messing up the house. She would read books and then discard them onto the floor, leaving them for me to pick up. She would take clothes off the hangers and leave them on the floor before walking all over them. Not just my clothes, but my parents' too. So I had to wash them all myself and hang them up, only for her to mess them up again. The worst was on the third day, before the evening came, a storm came through. Normally, I love the rain, the noise it makes, and the water falling from the sky. It was the perfect time to go play in the garden, but with Aurora, I realized how much of a mess mud really made. She skipped through the mud puddles in bare feet, and she would rip up plants in the garden sitting in the soft dirt. She had everything she needed, and she was making things bad. She would run through the mud and then come back into the house, tracking it everywhere. She would then take my clothes to clean the mud off her before going out to do it all over again. I still couldn't make her stop. I tried locking the door, and the door still opened for her. I tried fighting her, and she wouldn't even notice that I was trying to hurt her. I tried begging to her, but she just stepped around me, oblivious to what I wanted to do, as she went on with her muddy games. The only thing I could do was try to clean up after her. It rained for hours, and no matter how much I cleaned or how many loads of laundry I ran, it only seemed to be making way for more dirt. When the storm finally stopped, it was past midnight. My hands were red and raw, and I finally put in the final load of clothes into the dryer. I finally scrubbed up the last bit of mud from the floor when I saw Aurora sitting on the couch, reading from one of Father's books in the fireplace's light without a single care in the world. Why are you doing this? I asked her in tears, and she only chuckled. You're welcome to leave at any time. You don't have to clean up after me either. You could just leave a mess for him when he gets home. I won't do that. I love my father and I want him to come home to a clean house, I told Aurora, and she shrugged. If you say so. That night I slept deep, even with all the Mara swarming and Aurora holding me down. The next morning, father finally came home. I hadn't seen my mother in months, but when I saw her with my father, I realized how badly things had gotten. She sat in a wheelchair. Her arms and legs were all shriveled up, and through her pale skin I could see her veins. Her feet were pointing straight down, and her eyes were still closed. Even as father wheeled her back to bed and she moved, she didn't stir. After he laid her back in bed, he spoke to me. They couldn't do anything. I I don't know what to do, he said with his head in his hands, and I saw just how sad my father was. This problem was one he couldn't fix, and he loved her so much. At that moment, I didn't think about how much my mother hated me. I only thought about how much I loved my father. I ran up to him to hug him, and he hugged me back with a single arm. I'm tired, sweetie. I'm going to bed early. I'll see you in the morning, he said. All I could do was try not to cry. I love you, Daddy, I said, and he responded, I love you too, he said as I left his room. The sun was still up when father fell asleep, and Aurora stood in my doorway while I packed my bag with clothes. She still didn't let me grab food, but she waited for me to pack. Now, if you're going to do this right, you will head to the crossroads down the lane and choose the correct path. If you can do that, you'll find a loving family for you at the end of the road. And your mother will wake up. You're doing the best thing here, Aurora reassured me. Why? Why does it feel like the wrong thing to do? I asked her. I didn't say it was the right thing, just the best thing. What are the alternatives here? You stay here and she never wakes up and your father takes care of her forever? Or you die and she wakes up? Or you kill her and get taken away? At least this way, you both get to live, Aurora told me as I grabbed my bag and I made my way outside. I had been down the lane many times, but this was the first time it felt cold, even though it was a summer day. The world felt so sad as I made my way to the crossroads to make my decision, hoping I chose the right way. That day, after Aurora left, a woman woke up from a very long sleep. Even though her muscles were weak and she was in pain, she still smiled. Her house was quiet and her husband was lying next to her, asleep. She knew that the deal was made and now she was finally childless and she could live a perfect life again. But she saw, in the corner of her room, a familiar golden-eyed girl, one who sat and stared at the woman, a girl that the woman's husband could never see.